All right, so I have my Datsun, which runs the Speedwino, and then I have my motorcycle, and I also have my 56 Ford Fairlane. Now, one of the things you'll notice from my video is I showed a video of the Ford, and I started. I just barely tapped the starter and the thing fires right up.
And she's up and rolling.
On my Datsun, it takes a little bit longer. I end up cranking it for a few seconds. There's a couple of reasons why. I'll get to that in a second. But I also want to show you on my motorcycle. So here's my motorcycle. It's just a basic carburetor setup. It's cold. Haven't ran it at all. Just dirty and dirty. But if I go ahead and kick on, and I give it one full throttle, so we put it in neutral. Fires up. It runs fairly smooth. That's all it does. And there's kind of a trick to this, so let me kind of explain. I'll just shut this off now. So what comes down here, and I'm going to flood it out this time, is here's my acceleration pump. That little pump right there, as I throw back the throttle, is actually squirting in a little bit of fuel. So as I come in here and I'll throttle it back, I just squirted fuel into the cylinder. Now, on my old carbureted 56, I do the same thing. I give it one pump all the way down to the floor, and this does two things. It gives it a little shot of gas, and it also goes ahead and sets the choke. Now, on mine, I have a manual choke that I set on the other side of the engine, but I'll go ahead and kind of talk about that now. I'll go ahead and kind of talk about what this new May update on firmware did for Speedwino and how this kind of comes into play. So what I'm going to do, come over here and kind of talk on my car while I record this on my phone. How about that? Okay. Okay. So here I am in the Speedwino. This is a newer MS Droid file, but the principle is still the same. If I come in here and go to my tuning section, and I go ahead and let's say I go to my startup and idle. Now there's two things that they enhanced over this past release that I absolutely love. The first one is the priming pulse width. So just like I did before, where I give it a little shot of the throttle on my bike behind me and give it a fire, and that allows it to start right up, the same thing is true with my Datsun. When I turn the key on, initially it gives it a little priming shot, and it's 2 milliseconds worth of fuel. Now mostly, if my car is just barely turning on, the fuel pump is usually still pressurizing the full pressure at that point in time. But what I found is on my car, 2 milliseconds was great for hot starts. So before, after I had my warm-up enrichment set, after I had my after-start enrichment set, and I went in there and I would start the car on a warm day after it had been running, I would get hot starts where it would have to sit there and crank or flood clear if I didn't back off the priming pulse width. So now I'm at a point now with this new feature where I can start tuning the priming pulse width based on temperature. So in this case, I just did the update just recently. You'll see here, everything's just 2 milliseconds. That's what my default value is. But I'll start adding in a little curve. So for those of you that are looking to do this, what I recommend is if you are out here, let's say a day like today, go ahead and kick the key on, kick the key off, kick the key on. That would double, in my case, that would be 4 milliseconds worth of priming pulse width. And if that allows it to start faster, then you're on the right track. I'll go ahead and give it a little bit more of an extreme example. I'll give it 4 ons and offs to see how much that would do. That would be about 6 milliseconds. Now, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it could be a big difference. So I'll pause for a moment. My phone's up there and it'll connect probably, but let's go ahead and give this a shot. So here I am. Put the key in. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm in neutral. Not too bad. Definitely improved. I can make that better though. Okay. So that is a good way to test it. I mean, just in that short little brief moment, I was able to fire up the car a little bit quicker than it normally does. So that's something I'm going to be watching for. And the car was ice cold. I hadn't started it today at all. I'm just getting ready for work. So I'll come in here, I'll play with these values, I'll start plugging in others. That's a good way to test if you've got too much pulse width or too little pulse width. Keep in mind, if you go too much, you have to do the embarrassing thing of crank, 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 Okay, flood clear, crank, 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 and then release flood clear, and it'll finally fire. Always drives me nuts. Or it starts messing with you, and it'll start firing while you're on flood clear because the spark is still going the whole time. So then you look like the idiot that the car can't start. Luckily, I haven't had to deal with that for a while, but let me go ahead and I'll continue on. I'm going to come back out of here, and I'll show one of the other things that they did in this latest update, and that is to do the same thing with after start enrichment. So notice here I've got a flat line all the way across all my temperatures, but if I come into the editing phase of it, and I'll just go to table view because I prefer that better, you notice everything's at 20% on my after start enrichment. That's where I found my car likes it. Right after it fires, it finds 20% over a few seconds to be really key for my car. Now, what I will do in this case is I'll start changing it. That 20 was based on the warmest value I could get. So on a hot day, warm, I could get away with about 20% increase. Now keep in mind, the warm-up enrichment and the after-start enrichments kind of multiply on top of each other from my understanding, so it still kind of behaved as a temperature curve as well, but I still had to be slightly conservative. Now, in this case, I can go in there and I can start bumping up so that, let's say this temperature right now, which is low 60s, I can go ahead and get that up there a little bit more percentage. And so my after-start enrichment will start kicking in and help it warm up a little bit better or get it in that right area. So that's some really cool things with how they've done this latest update. I absolutely love how they're continuing on with the firmware and always pushing out things. Another great thing, which I'm probably going to have to dive into here in the near future, is they have released something really cool. So I'll go back to tuning, and I will go to, I got to remember where they tune it. I think it's tuning and then acceleration enrichment. And you'll notice right here, I have it based on TPS. Now, if you understand the needs of your car and what you're running, you could run a TPS just fine for acceleration enrichment. Usually, though, TPS is great for cars that are Alpha N, or if they are maybe individual throttle bodies, usually not turboed cars. In this case, I have a turboed car, and if I come in here and let's say I'll go ahead and I'll change this up. So here's my map-based one, and I didn't plug in these values. I haven't even tested it yet. But if I go ahead and do a map-based acceleration enrichment, what I am going to be doing is I'm going to be gearing it more toward my setup, and that would be a turbo-based setup. Now, this isn't a perfect setup. If I really wanted to get my acceleration and my tuning down pat, I probably wouldn't be using a single map sensor to do my tuning. I'd probably use a map and an exhaust map. So for those of you that are familiar with that, it measures the pressure inside of your turbo manifold and compares it against that into your intake manifold, and then is able to base the tune on that. Using a map-based acceleration enrichment, it would be like the silver standard compared to the gold standard, which I would consider more of the map EMAP. This is just another way to go in there and start doing that tuning. You can still, of course, have acceleration and whisper based on all those different conditions. I'm actually thinking about going to get an EMAP to play around with. That's always been one of those things in the back of my mind that I've wanted to play with. I've just never taken the time. I played on it in one car a long, long time ago. Those that do diesel tuning know EMAP way better than anything else. I think it'd be really fun because it gives you such a fine-tooth detail on how you're tuning the car. It can take your tune from a great tune to just a flat-out amazing tune. And for those of you that might not know what I'm talking about, really quickly, if I come into the settings, I think it's engine constants. Let me see if they have it under here. I guess not. Oh, control algorithm. So they have IMAP and EMAP, and that's what I'm referring to right there, is that IMAP and EMAP. Okay, so I'll back out of there. Anyway, that's kind of one of the things I wanted to show you guys, was just a couple of the new updates that they pushed out on Speeduino as far as it goes for tuning with your, I guess, pulse width for cranking, as well as your after start enrichments now with the time-based. So if you've done any updates recently to the May, please go in there, tune that. I showed you a little shortcut there with you can try with turning the key on and off to check that priming pulse width. Of course, it did help my car crank over a little bit faster. But yeah, if you haven't updated, go ahead and update. Why wait? They've done some really great things. There was a small little thing with data logging. Just read the release notes, you'll see it. I think we're good to go now. I think he might have made an update, but yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'm always happy to help out. Take care.